Hello everyone, welcome to this video. In this video I'd like to talk to you about generic strategies. So we talked already about strategies in the previous video. We talked about that there were a set of actions that managers take to outperform the company's competitors and achieve superior profitability. We unpacked this, we explained all of these different features, and so we talked particularly about the fact that strategies are very specific to the company and so that they're very company dependent. However, sometimes you can have some strategies that are more archetypical, they're more like generic, as the generic strategies phrase has in it. And the idea behind this is that they have some common features that appeal to basically any type of organization. And these generic strategies give you some focus, they guide some future decisions that you're going to make. There are some generic strategies that are, because of that, important to realize when you're starting your business or when you're trying to change your business or when you're, for example, trying to classify your opponents. And in this video I'd like to talk to you about those. So first of all, let's talk about the low-cost generic strategy. So note here that this is about low costs, not necessarily low price. Yes, a low cost allows you to have a low price, but if you don't have a low cost but you do have a low price, well, then you have a problem, because this is going to go at the cost of your profitability, of course. So the idea behind low cost strategy is particularly so that you need to be efficient, right? You need to be able to try to get economies of scale, meaning that you should try to be able to produce as many products as you can with the costs that you have. So as your products increase, you need to be able to spread your fixed costs that are not that much dependent on the amount of products you produce. You need to be able to spread those costs over your products. And with this, you need to be able to get much more out of the same level of costs that you're making. And this, of course, is going to return to you in terms of economies of scale. So being able to produce more than that your costs are going to increase. And with that, being able to reach a certain cost efficient level. On top of this, capacity is also very important. You need to make sure that you don't have any idle capacity, so you don't have any capacity that you're actually not using, because that's of course a waste of resources. If you have capacity, you need to make sure you use it, because then again you become cost efficient. Also, what's important is of course that you try to substitute your inputs, more expensive ones, for cheaper ones, because cheaper input will also result in on total a cheaper cost of manufacturing, eventually cheaper end product. Also important for the low cost strategy is that you try to eliminate non-essential activities. Basically, you try to eliminate waste in the production process, and basically the whole process, starting from your input to your output, and with that of course also your marketing and whatever. You need to make sure that, for example, if you're selling through distributors, perhaps you can sell directly to the end customer. Perhaps you can outsource stuff, and with that you can have the same production facility be cheaper. You need to simply make sure that if something is happening that you don't get benefits from, that you cut it out. All of this of course will help you when you cut your costs to also cut your prices. And that's essential to realize. And some companies, through these low-cost strategies, such as for example Walmart, have become tremendous organizations. You don't always have to be different than someone else. You can also simply be cheaper and be very successful in that. Now, certain companies are low-cost companies, but they're very focused. So they just focus themselves on a specific part of the market. Think about, for example, Ryanair. It's a low-cost company, but with that, basically, it is not focusing on all sorts of customers. It's more focusing on those people that don't want to have that much luggage with them, that are not that much after comfort when they fly. And so economizing on all sorts of non-essential activities in this area allows this company, Ryanair, to be a low-cost company for a focused part of people who want to fly. The second generic strategy I would like to talk to you about is the differentiation strategy. You can think about Apple in this regard. Important here is that you try to be different than someone else, and this you can of course do in many different ways. This generic strategy is about unique products and unique services, but as said, you can do this in so many ways. You can have high quality inputs, right? And with that you can differentiate yourself. You can have superior design, you can have superior performance, you can have a superior customer service, right? Zappos in this regard is, for example, very much known for its superior customer service. And if all of this leads to people wanting your product much more than when these things would not be around. So if your differentiation leads to a premium that is higher than the cost that this differentiation necessitates, well then of course there's a big plus to you. And so you need to make sure that this differentiation makes things easier perhaps, or grants people better performance, or provides less tangible satisfaction, like status or reputation. And so in this regard, perception becomes very important, right? How is this product or how is this service perceived? And is this going to lead to a premium that you then can, of course, put in your price and that people are going to pay for? So, in general terms, Apple is trying to do this, tries to be different in terms of ease of use, in terms of design. In a focused point of view, we can perhaps think about Ferrari, right? It is trying to be different than others, but not to every customer basically. It's trying to be different only for a small part of people who want to buy an automotive, and those are people who are more sporty, who are more adventurous, and want to of course pay a lot of money for that. And in this way, again, through a focused strategy within differentiation, you can make sure that you appeal perhaps not to everyone, but to a sufficient amount of people. Third generic strategy that we may want to talk to you about is the best cost strategy. And so the best cost strategy is basically in between the differentiation and low cost strategy, in the sense that if you want to be a best cost provider, you need to either have a lower cost for the same quality, or you need to have the same cost, but you need to be able to provide better quality with it. And this is not easy, okay? You need to either, be more efficient in terms of how you're using your resources than others, or you need to be able to get more quality out of the same input that others have. And of course, this is going to be depending on the people that you employ, on the technologies that you employ. It's going to be very important that you really, really are able to deliver more with the same, or are able to deliver the same with less. And because of that, the best cost provider is being very difficult, because some companies try to do this, but then they get stuck in the middle, in between the low cost providers and the differentiators, and then they find themselves go bankrupt, even though the generic strategy itself on paper made sense. And so at this point, perhaps you're asking to yourself, which of these strategies do we do when? So let's first talk about the low-cost provider strategy, okay? So a low-cost generic strategy you do when there's price competition, right? And so when price becomes very important for the consumer, and of course in this regard, goods and players should be kind of similar, and if they are, then of course you can engage in price competition, and then price becomes the most important thing here. It's also very important when consumers can easily switch to one another. If they can go to your competitor, well, then you should make sure that you are cheaper than someone else, right? It should also be very important that if you have only a few amount of buyers, and so because of that you don't have much choice about who you're going to sell your products to. But if these buyers are large, well, then you can just have a deal with one. You can sell a lot to this big buyer, and then perhaps you can gain efficiencies out of that. So also, when there's the threat of newcomers coming into your industry, and when they're able to undercut you on price, then again, you should very much think about whether you should perhaps again go for a low cost strategy to prevent others from undercutting you on price and perhaps kicking you out of the market. When doing this, of course, you should make sure that you maintain a certain level of quality. Nevertheless, right? If you engage in price competition, you should at least be able to offer the same quality. So that's very important. You should also make sure that, if you're cost cutting, that this cost cutting is not easily copyable, because then others will do the same, and then you will engage in a price war. Finally, cost reduction should not become a fixation. You should do it when you can, but you should not do it regardless of anything, because then again, you might get yourself in problems. So differentiation then is something that we need to talk about here. When to differentiate? Well, it should be when buyers appreciate diverse products, right? And actually also when products can actually be different. And if the buyer appreciates it, and if you can actually be different, then why not become a differentiator? Also important here is that only a few companies should be doing different things. If everyone does something different, then it might be very difficult to be value adding in you also becoming different. Also, it's very important that the change in the industry, it should come from technological change, because if that's the case, then you, through technological change, might be able to change the industry and might be able to tip all of the things in your favor. Important here is that the buyer can actually see what you do. It should be able to see that you are different, and it should be able to be willing to pay for this. You, at the same time, should not overspend in trying to become different, because if you do that, then of course you can also shoot in your own foot, and this might become a problem. The premium that you're going to get from being different is very important. Your costs should not become more than that. So we talked about low-cost providers, we talked about differentiators in terms of when to choose which generic strategy. Then we have this focus strategy that we also talked about in terms of low cost and in terms of the differentiation generic strategy. So you should be focused. If this niche that you're going to pick is big enough, if leaders in the industry have avoided being in a niche, if being in a niche is actually cheaper for you than being outside of it, if there are sufficient amount of niches, and because of that, people can choose whatever niche they want, and this will not bring you in a certain problematic situation. And if these niches, of course, are also not saturated, if there are too many people in a niche, then it's not really a niche anymore, and then it again becomes too crowded and can lead to all sorts of wars. And you should be afraid, you should be aware of the fact that others might follow you inside of this niche, especially the bigger players in the industry might follow you there. And are you, when others are going to follow you in this niche, are you able to battle with them, and are you able to win that battle? All of these are important. The size of the niche being big enough is important to get some scale economies, right, to be cost efficient. And of course, if leaders have not avoided the niche, if leaders are going to follow you, or if being in the niche is not going to be cheaper, then you might have a serious problem in battling out others when you're going to get in that niche and when you're going to start operating there. Finally, when should you choose to be a best cost provider, right? So that's the final question that we'd like to underscore. Well, first of all, you need to have the middle of the market be big enough. You have low cost providers, you have differentiators, but in the middle, is there enough room for being a best cost provider? If you're going to be in the middle of the industry, are people going to appreciate your differentiation, yes or no? And are they going to appreciate that you're not that much different, but that you're able to be different with the same costs and the same prices? And if that is the case, or the flip side of things, if they are going to appreciate you being the same but for cheaper, of course then you should be a best cost provider, because there's sufficient room in the middle of the pack. One thing that you might also think about in this regard is recession times. When there's a recession, people might move from differentiators to best cost providers because they are cheaper by definition, but still delivering sufficiently good quality to be of good substitution. I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, please don't forget to hit the like and the subscribe buttons. I wish you all the best in the world and hope to see you again anytime soon. Take care.